personal significance, what has been called the enchanted loom by Charles Sherrington. Early in the computer revolution, Stanford psychologist David Rumelhart famously said, "The knowledge is in the connections," though at the time it was a brilliant insight regarding machine operations. And it has been a key in the development of neural networks and machine learning. But taken literally, it cannot be true. There is no knower in the computational device. The computer knows nothing of the content or meaning. It has no sense of experience, no center of awareness. Even the terms it is trained on are reduced to digital tokens to be sifted, sorted, and shuttled in the search for mathematical ratios and statistically predictive patterns. It is neutral with regard to purpose, value, and general knowledge. It's mechanism, pure structure. It's not the same thing as meaning. Leibniz warned us. Moreover, he said, it must be confessed that perception and that which depends upon it are inexplicable on mechanical grounds, that is to say, by means of figures and motions. And supposing there were machines so constructed as to think, feel, and have perceptions, it might be conceived as increased in size while keeping the same proportions so that one might walk into it as into a mill. That being so, we should, on examining its interior, find only parts which work one upon another and never anything by which to explain a perception. The astrophysicist Arthur Eddington put it more plainly. Our knowledge of physics, he said, is only an empty shell, a form of symbols. It is knowledge of structural form and not knowledge of content. All through the physical world runs that unknown content, which must surely be the stuff of our consciousness. But what is that unknown content that Eddington speaks of? And how does human consciousness grasp hold of it? 25 years ago, Terry Winograd, also professor at Stanford in computer science, he argued that the human mind is infinitely more complicated than mathematical logic would allow, that the patchwork rationalism, that is reasoning with simple facts and rules, that had guided artificial intelligence research for the previous 30 years was a misuse of analogy and a wrong-minded approach. He stated plainly, seekers after the glitter of intelligence are misguided in trying to cast it in the base metal of computing. Winograd cautioned that computers may be better understood as language machines, machines that manipulate symbols, machine code, rather than thinking machines. But he noted that human language, unlike machine code, ultimately depends on tacit understandings, not susceptible to mechanically determinable mathematical logic. Tacit, as implicit, implied but not stated, with a content that is understood but not expressed and maybe is inexpressible. Tacit knowledge, the broad awareness of reality, something grasped through the active experience of living, inseparably thought and feeling, known within the fullness of embodied being. Tacit knowledge, carried unconsciously as the background context for every thought and embedded in every expression of human language, but irreducible to mathematical logic. For the human mind, that term tacit was described by Michael Polanyi as personal knowledge. As he explained, we can know more than we can tell. He went on to say that not only is there knowledge that cannot be adequately articulated by verbal means, but also that all knowledge is rooted in such tacit knowledge. If one steps back to consider more deeply what is actually going on in the embodied human mind, it is clear that it is dramatically unlike machine processing. Flesh and blood human beings, the organismal self, has a distinct human awareness of existential realities, of personal place and purpose within the world. And every organism dwells as precarious being, potent but perishable, and as with all sentient beings, passionate and purposeful, churning and bubbling within the multiple streams of pleasures and pains, memories and aspirations, hopes and fears. This human interpretive frame of tacit knowledge is of the personal autobiographical self, the narrative self, our sense of who we are, the nature of the world and our place within it. A vast and varied store of memories and personal intentions sets the context of every human thought. And these in turn are embedded within the interpretive context of our culture, within a mythic cosmology of origins and ultimate ends, tacit understanding, personal knowledge, flowing forth from the inward experience of our human journey within the world. Today, the impoverished patchwork rationalism of earlier AI has been superseded by the deeper and more opaque processes of so-called machine learning, including large language models such as ChatGPT, algorithms and statistical models that computer systems use to effectively perform a specific task without explicit instructions. But again, the machine is not like the human mind. It appears to employ an entirely different mode of operation, intense pattern recognition, a kind of brute force processing in search of functional solutions, lacking the subtlety and comprehensive personal content and character of human cognition. ChatGPT is a master of prediction, of mathematical correlation. It's not perception and it's not meaningful thought. It's a mimic machine, not a truth seeker. And this brings us directly to the mystery of how it is that we, as human beings, know anything, how language arises and serves as the medium of human communication and the bearer of human culture. To understand this, we will need to recognize how these capacities are grounded in the structure and dynamics of our embodied existence, life lived within a world that itself speaks to us through our experience, both physical and interpersonal, the world as an intelligible language of being. The given world, not just a neutral backdrop like a stage set for our lives, but the ground of tacit knowledge that infuses all thought, language, and action, all meaning, and delivers to us in our interactions the human factor of our being. So machine learning is, at least for now, it's still a metaphor. And like all metaphors, it carries a certain limited analogy of similarity, but it is not the thing to which it is compared. The Turing test is not an indicator of human consciousness in a computer. The Turing test is a measure of human gullibility, the gullibility of the human observer. Those who dispense wild speculations about complete uploading of the human mind in silico would do well to reflect on the indispensable role of the body, the organic substrate that supports the functioning of a human consciousness with all the complexity of personal context and content that implies. These reflections on tacit knowledge and embodied knowing lead us out of Silicon Valley to the marshlands and mountains on either side, directly back to living nature and the mystery of animal minds, and most problematically, the question of what it is that distinguishes the human species from all other living beings. Throughout history, there have been repeated attempts to identify a single distinguishing characteristic that defines human nature and endows a privileged status within the natural and moral orders. And here's a partial list: the laughing animal, the animal that cooks, the featherless biped, the only creature with a marked projection in the center of its face, a nose, the only creature with genuine symbolic language, the rational animal, capable of the creation and transmission of culture, metacognition, self-awareness, moral conscience, theory of mind, and the animal that blushes. Boethius was the first, I think, to say an individual substance of a rational nature. That's human beings. But note that every one of these makes a reference throughout this long tradition to both body and mind. We sense that the human difference and the difference it makes are most deeply distilled in the meaning of minds, yet the body is there as well. And of course, the animal that blushes is a direct reference to the human body, but also implicitly a reference to mind. But mind in its inwardness, self-conscious, sensitive and socially aware, morally and spiritually alert to the boundaries of self-disclosure, shame, and personal place within the larger arena of the human story. Mark Twain's quip that humans are the only animal that blushes and the only species that needs to. It's revealing. It reveals our uniquely spiritual place within the natural order. But how do these distinctive capacities arise? What are their material, psychological, and social foundations? It's increasingly clear they have deep roots in the origins of life. But again, as with computers, it's easy to overinterpret similarity as identity. And again, the misplaced metaphors can work in both directions, considering animals as persons with human rights, or viewing all human motivations and intentions as serving basic biological need and reducing the human to mere beast. Though we share many capacities with animals, including certain aspects of intelligence, it's important to recognize that a quantitative difference can be the basis of a qualitative difference. A difference of degree can be a difference of kind. And the human brain is 3.5 times bigger than expected for an ape of our size. Likewise, reorganization of anatomical, physiological, or neurological characteristics and novel combinations of functions can lead to radically new emergent properties. Though we share all the basic brain parts with other mammals, their proportion and the functional dominance of their interconnections differ in important ways. This hierarchy of neural refinement converges in the prefrontal cortex, the center of abstract analysis, planning, decision-making, and rational comprehension and control, a region in the human brain that is 5 times larger than that of chimps. Moreover, even small mutations or changes in gene regulation can have a dramatic impact on species form and function. This is evident in the anatomical and neurological changes in our vocal apparatus that allow spoken language. Most animal vocalizations seem to be under the emotional control rather than cognitive control. They are automated information exchanges, fixed action patterns, limited to in terms of flexibility and meaning, typically having to do with reproduction, food, and alarm. Even great apes do not seem to have voluntary fine motor control of the facial muscles of voice that we use in speech, and their vocal apparatus does not enable articulation of the required vowels, essential for speech. Moreover, even when apes have been taught to use symbols to communicate, their range and depth of expression is very limited. As one researcher commented, we can teach them to speak, but they have nothing to say. Human speech, on the other hand, is primarily driven by cortical areas of the left hemisphere that allow for voluntary control and extreme flexibility. With its unlimited range of sequential sounds, human language allows the communication of a vast range of ideas, setting the essential foundations for cooperative sociality, teaching, and the transmission and accumulation of culture. This distinctive example of anatomic and neurologic revision, allowing a greater range of response, may be the key to the broader foundation of human freedom and the foundation of human uniqueness. So I want to show you a video here of a fixed action pattern. This is a goose, and the action pattern is, 5 more minutes. The action pattern is reacting to the curve of the egg. It pulls it back into the nest, but you see the billiard ball has the curve, and therefore she pulls the billiard ball into the nest. So by this idea has been used as the grounds for something called the less is more hypothesis, that in human nature, many genes that had been set as deterministic genetic mechanisms that fine-tune other species to a particular niche, human beings they lost these genes and became more general purpose organisms. Liberated from fixed action patterns, we are open to a wider range of response, together with the unique flexibility and adaptability evident in our anatomical form and our high level of neuroplasticity. This sets the conditions for greater top-down neurologic control of human behavior. Ideas, concepts, and moral and spiritual principles become the central axis of human motivation and action, giving ascendancy to intelligence, imagination, and free will. Indeed, the open and indeterminate character of human nature is close to the core of our species' defining distinctions. We are a general purpose organism, adapted for adaptability in every dimension of our nature, both somatic and psychic. With our capacities for comprehension and control, we have no set way of being in the world. We are metaphorically speaking, a furless creature clothed by culture. The French existentialist Simone de Beauvoir is reported to have said, "Human beings are that species which by nature has no nature." But that is, of course, not true. Our adaptability is grounded in a highly refined biology of our particular bodily form, and the meaning of our lives depends on it. And this brings us back to the mystery of the embodied mind, how it emerges from the most minute molecules, proteins, polymers, cells, and circuits, yet stretches forth in contemplation of the furthest reaches of the cosmic order. The human brain, 3.5 pounds, the most complex physical structure in the known universe. Nearly 100 billion neurons and networks of such millisecond speed that they integrate, by some estimates, a quadrillion synaptic connections in a fantastic behind-the-scenes choreography that makes possible the thought and movement of real-time life at the level of human perception. But how do we go from chemicals to consciousness, from primary physical forces to the vibrant sensitivity and self-awareness of the human person? While this is an enormously complex process, I want to point in closing to just a few of the important milestones along the way. In doing so, we can at once recognize why our current computational devices come nowhere close to the capacities of organic nature, and we can in the process gain a deeper appreciation for the mystery and majesty of the human form. This in turn should give us pause before we endorse technological projects for the radical revision of the human body and mind. First, the unique powers of organic substrate of life. It's astonishing to realize that these basic vital powers can accomplish what they can accomplish even in the absence of mind. How complex, capable, and apparently purposeful purely mechanical, organic, biological systems can actually be. This is a video of a white blood cell chasing a bacterium. And as you watch this, you can see how a mindless mechanism based on chemotaxis, chemical signals, can accomplish a lot. It depends on the direct chemical signal and a fixed mechanical response. But look at it, it almost seems like it's got intention. And when it finally gets the bacteria, we all sort of cheer. It lacks completely the adaptive flexibility of genuine choice, self-awareness, or will that characterizes mind, yet it gets the job done. It vividly demonstrates the remarkable properties and potentials of organic molecules. There is no computer or robot even remotely like it. Second, the emergence of emotion, memory, and a sense of self. Building on the basic organic capacities and detection of locomotion, emotion delivers integrated inner sense of subjective feeling. Animal life is, by its very character, precarious being. Together with awareness and action, desire or appetite forms the central axis of survival and the very infrastructure of mind. Desire distills as a coherent sense of self, urgently engaged in the essential tasks of life. As Leon Kass has rightly pointed out, desire, not DNA, is the deepest principle of life. Value, meaning, and a sense of purpose, characteristic of living nature, but entirely absent in computers. And then finally, the human form, upright posture. The human transformation to upright posture is reflected in every detail of our deep structure, both somatic and psychic. For example, the freeing of the upper limbs and the refinement of the tool of tools that we spoke of at the beginning allows the unity of comprehension, creativity, and constructive action. Moreover, there is no human mind separate from and independent of the body, and no pure reason apart from bodily experience. Furthermore, reason is not literal but metaphorical. The very structures of our categories and concepts come from the nature of our bodily experience, the world as we know it by living in it. And this, in turn, opens us to language, sociality, and the collective mind, the cooperation, accumulation of culture. The unique powers of the organic substrate of life have opened us to a vast range of possibility for communication through the facial muscles. Here's a little French for you. And the similarity of our embodied minds provides the shared terms of thought and language that make possible complex communication and cooperation. The very configuration of our upright bodily form places us in a face-to-face encounter with one another, and our furless face, with its 30 muscles of expression and vocal control, make possible a deep and genuine communication. Within the distilled conceptual frame of shared language, a deepened consciousness emerges, together with the collective coordination of minds and momentum of cultural advance. Together we move beyond the imperatives of the present to the creative constructions of cultural meaning and values. We weave an interpretive story rich in ideals and aspirations, a narrative by which we navigate the world, and finally emerge with imagination. This increasing freedom of imagination, the breadth of awareness, is in turn extended by extraordinary adaptive accommodations. The human capacity for imagination goes beyond adaptive anticipation. Imagination is the realizing of ideals in the fullest manifestation of human freedom. While most creatures are pushed by biological and ecological exigencies, we are pulled into the future by our desires, dreams, and images of fullest flourishing. Together with the ceaseless drive to organize and explain the world, our cognitive imperative, the capacities to calculate, extrapolate, and recombine are used to reconfigure that which is into that which could be. From the human capacity for imagination and the drive to pursue the possible comes something unprecedented in the history of nature, the freedom of aspiration toward an envisioned ideal, the human ascent to a coherent moral and spiritual ideal is the fullest extension, the culmination of our most profound developmental thrust and that of living nature. Within human community, we explore our world in the counterpoint and correction of a shared dialogue, seeking comprehensive understanding of existence that stretches forth for the fullness and flourishing of life. We sense a significance to human life that mysteriously transcends the biological processes that brought it forth. Within the strife and struggle of earthly life, we become acutely aware of the central significance of both suffering and self-sacrifice. Conscious and comprehending, we lift to the level of love, beholding with wonder our place and possibility in the whole of life. We are a revolution within nature that revises our understanding of the nature of nature. We are matter come to mind and moral awareness. Amid increasing intuitions of transcendent design and destiny overarching all of life, we ascend to an awareness of the spiritual unity of an ordered cosmos, where the material and the moral flow forth from a single creative source, consummated and completed through the emergence of the human person.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Bill. C'était une très belle synthèse vous montrant justement comment de la bactérie jusqu'à l'homme, les différentes caractéristiques se forment pour faire nous rendre uniques. Vous voyez, je calcule donc je pense, mais il est pénible, on le débranche. Tu porteras le sac à dos. Voilà, ces machines, ça peut être très utile aussi. Donc merci encore à Bill Hurlbut.